Welcome back to our viewers. Today we have something which is the flavor of the season, or rather the flavor of the last decade, which is startups. And who else to guide us through this other than Narayan? Mr. Narayan Thammaiah is presently a venture partner at Accel. He has more than 2.5 decades of HR experience. His personal interests include running and mountaineering, and of course he's a wonderful executive coach for as long as I've known him. Thank you, Narayan, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sid. Thanks for giving the opportunity to have this conversation. I hope you and your family are safe at home.
Oh, absolutely, and reciprocating that sentiment too.
Oh
Right.
yeah, very much. Thank you.
So, Narayan, today I think our viewers would be really interested to know, hey, what makes HR successful in startups? Or as a HR head, what do I do to become successful, right? So I think that's pretty much what's on our viewers' minds presently. And who better than you to give us a few insights around that? Over to you.
Wonderful. See, I think it's quite an interesting journey for anyone who would wish to work in a startup. The reason being is, if you go back and look at a couple of decades back, the way HR function was created was largely a function of administration, trying to administer people in the command and control mode. That's how the companies were started to form in the industrial era. Now, since the industrial era to now, there is a huge transformation which has happened during the course of knowledge industry. Knowledge industry has bought and made things quite seamlessly agile and more informative and quite enriching for any practitioner, either it is knowledge workers or it is people supporting them. So in that context, HR's role has changed considerably. From personal department to human resources to talent management, and talent management to people practice. Now, people keep wondering, what are these flavors? Now, to give you a little bit of thought here, personal department's role largely was to police and administer. Then came the human resources, where human resources were in charge of putting policies in place and were accountable for the well-being of the employees. These were the quasi-industrial era, which came in, and people were happy doing it. While they had a little bit of a research units inside the company, while the large organization was still manufacturing. Then came the talent management function. That's the era where functions were looked at as core. To give you an example, in talent management or anything you look at it from the function point of view. If an employee joins in as a marketing function as an executive, and then his whole life and value is to stay in the marketing function as long he is there for 20-25 years and exit as a marketing executive. Now, HR used to build these functional practices and functional capabilities for people to become successful. Now, in the newer generation, because there are millennials, there are Generation X, and let's also acknowledge there are 4 generations of workforce or 5 generations of workforce who we need to interact and work on a day-to-day basis. Now, in this context, if you see, the people practice becomes a people-centric. That means every individual employee is taken into consideration while formulating a practice inside the organization. So this is a paradigm shift for an administrator who's looking at a human resource function. So hence, in startups, this comes glaringly necessary for someone to think agile and work as a people practice practitioner. Now, that's set apart. And then let's go back and look at some of the other examples. Most of our orientations and learnings have been in multinational companies while we were working as practice managers. That means anything which is practiced in the US, we actually bring it down to India, modify it without understanding the context of a business. So, we're not close to the hot seat or the decision-making ground. While we were just trying to modify or nudge the organization to perform. Now, in the startup context, what happens is you're close to the hot seat where the decision is being made. Now, in most MNCs, if you see, probably you're growing your head count and you don't cash flow issues. And then because US companies or global companies are investing in India, they come back and say, okay, fine, I'm going to give you X amount of dollars and go back and build the center. You don't have cash flow issues. While in the Indian startup context, when you start working for a context, the cash flow issues will start to come into play. Now, the third and the fourth important part is growth. Your growth, what you see in MNC is probably is in terms of headcount, but not in terms of business complexities. While in startups, add a flavor of business complexity. That means, you're growing at 50, 100, 150, 200%. While you're growing in that phase, you're close to the hot seat, you're close to the cash flow management, and you think you're an administrator, which you can't be because, everything is off the ground and you need to start looking at a different paradigm. So this is the context of today's startup world. And for someone like this, in this environment to be successful, I would put three important attributes. Someone who's a great problem solver, who can look at every attribute as a problem. If you can't make everything as a policy or a process to make sure that you're an administrator. So this becomes an important factor. The second important factor is how closely you work and understand the business context. Because of cash flow issues, because of close to the hot seat, you need to make those decisions on an ongoing basis, because 50 to 65% of the costs are coming from the employee point of view, right? So the first one, as I said, is a great problem solver, because things are changing so fast and you need to adapt to it. The second one I said was making sure you understand the business well. The third and the most important one is agility. You need to be as agile as possible, considering the fact today you have 50 employees and you build something. Because one observation which I've had is HR practitioners are extremely good in putting policies and processes in place. While not understanding the context, these policies are scalable or not, right? So hence, in that context, agility and how frequently you go back and look at and talk to your customers, go back, and because let's acknowledge another important factor is HR is an helping function. The way I would look at this, it's not an administrative function. It's an helping and an enabling function. In this context, if you marry that with the three which I said, problem solver, understanding the business pretty well, being agile, automatically it compiles you to be a great practitioner to work with the business while you're focusing on making business successful. So these three becomes a key ingredients for HRs to become successful in the startup world.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So really, you took us along the journey of what the function has evolved to becoming people process practitioners, and really looking at the difference between multinational and what's a startup context like. And of course, the three simple axioms that you've given, and practice nudges, if I may call them, and working closely with the business. Some of my friends were asking me this. They said most of the startups are tech enabled, and unlike, let's say, a very a company that's been around for a long time, one doesn't really know what's happening in the tech team. One doesn't know what's happening in the product team, right? How does HR really kind of keep themselves updated of what's happening, and then how does HR really contribute? So this was a question actually that came up in one of the WhatsApp groups. Would you like to address?
Very nice. Good question. See, most importantly, now that's a part of how the organizations are designed. Many times what really happens is HR is what a transactional function. People name HR as a transactional function. It's largely because what do? We hire people, we fire people, we manage payroll, we manage process and practice and policies, and largely we are known for that. And if you ask the general public, what is HR known for? These are 4 or 5 attributes which most of them would largely talk about. But do they really talk about categories like how the organization is designed, how the information is flowing, who's responsible for creating an org design? One, what are the capabilities required for someone to be performing well inside an organization? How are you going to build a seamless career progression for a guy who's joined in your product team, and after 2 years, then he wants to go back and do marketing, and after 2 years, then he wants to go back and do sales, and then after 6 years, he'll come back and say, hey, you know what, I want to do something in strategy. because that's the need of the hour. That's what I said. People practice function needs to look at enabling all those things. For these things to happen, a human resource or a people practitioner need to make sure he understands the product first. Now, this is an important tip, tips which I tell everyone is understand and acknowledge one thing. Do you know each and every attributes of your product? You click a button, what is going to happen? You remove a payment gateway, what is going to happen? An HR function need to clearly understand what the product look like. How does the company make money? What does the engineering team does? Do they follow agile or scrum or project management? Whatever methodology they're following, are they using Confluence for collaboration? Are they using Slack for collaboration? Be part of those languages. We just can't sit in one corner and say, okay, fine, I'll respond to emails, which I get, or I will process payroll and keep quiet, or I will hire people. That is not going to work. Today is the time for everyone to collaborate and make organizations successful. For that to happen, HR needs to take the first step and go back and have conversation to understand first the product, and then understand what features someone is building, which team is building, what problems do they have, what situations are they going through, how can HR function help in solving those problems. That is also giving the context of helping them solve their business cases.
Sure, wonderful. I think something that I'm going to request you on behalf of our viewers is also may not be today, but sometime in the future, something around org design and also around the phases of HR capability over the evolution of organizations. So I'll put that request in there for you, with you, and leave that for the moment. Anything else, Narayan? Thank you for sharing all this. Anything else that you would like to share in terms of what you've seen differentiates between successful HR guys and the not so successful guys? Or if I were to change the topic a little, or the question a little differently, I'll let you choose. What do you look for when you what do startups look for when they're hiring HR leaders?
Okay, now that's a very broad question. The most important thing is the first thing I would go back and look at is there a capability match between or a synergy between the founder and the HR practitioner? The most important thing is that, because at the end of it, HR's role is to translate the vision of what the founder wants to build his company on. And someone needs to be capable of understanding and build it. While they all come with a great understanding of functional capabilities, but the most important thing is every organization is unique. Every founder is unique. Every founder thinks of building his own company in his own style and own format. Understanding that is what I would say a very critical attribute for HR to become successful. Then comes, as I said, being agile, being a problem solver, and making sure understanding business, and then looking at in the lens of an helper and an enabler versus an administrator. When you put an administrative mindset hat, that means you start to bucketize things, you try to optimize things, and you try to get into the command and control mode, which probably does not work or will not work in the start. So hence, in that context, those 4 attributes, along with the founder mindset of what he wants to build and how he wants to build, if that granularity of information is available with HR, I think it's a great marriage for both of them to become successful.
Lovely, thank you. And as we conclude this call, I recollect something someone once said, saying that when someone works to make others successful, that individual becomes a leader. I think you so nicely put that across, saying that here is HR in startups, and if someone does it really well, they get to practice leadership and get paid for it.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you so much, Narayan. Really wonderful having you over. Stay safe and stay at home. And look forward to having you over in many more episodes with our viewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sid. Thanks for having me on, and happy to help the ecosystem in any way. Thank you.
Thank you.